Hi, I'm Pastor Bill Brannan. I'm with the Liberty Hill Voters Association. Our goal is to provide educational resources to the citizens of Liberty Hill so that they can get involved in the local city and help develop a flourishing and thriving community. I'm here today with Andrea Farr, and I talked with her about her experience with working with the city, especially with regard to the sign and lighting ordinance in Liberty Hill. And I think that some of what she's going to share with us is going to be very beneficial to you, the voters and citizens of Liberty Hill, when deciding what kind of values we want to pursue as a city. So thank you, Andrea, for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Like I mentioned, I saw you speaking at the P&Z committee, and I was really intrigued by some of the things you said about the implications of both the sign ordinance and the lighting ordinance. I think I'd like to start by asking you, tell me your thoughts about the sign ordinance here in Liberty Hill.
Well, I appreciate what you said, Bill, about trying to determine the values that the city wants to have and what they want to support. And as a small business owner and a property owner, the signs are very important. And to a small business, typically a sign or your signage is maybe one of the only ways in which you're going to be able to advertise and to market to your community. And that's typically a very large investment that you're making.
Right.
We spent over $30,000 on the signs that we put up around the location when we first opened. So that was an important avenue to us. And at the time, those were permitted with the city. That was part of what the city's regulations were, and we followed those. And so those were just very important to us, and made a decision on whether or not we were going to invest in this community or not.
So when you're talking about having a sign here in Liberty Hill, I think a broader picture is to help our citizens understand the value of businesses in Liberty Hill and their flourishing for the benefit of the citizens. You know, when I look at what's going on in Liberty Hill, I'm seeing a lot of new residential building happening. It's actually outside the city, and I don't know that everybody understands that, but all these people coming in, their cars are driving on roads owned by the city, and so that's creating wear and tear on the roads. We're seeing more and more accidents, so there's more demand for police. And with the small size of the city has to develop revenues to support all this growth that's happening. And if we don't develop the right kind of revenues as a city, then it's going to fall on property taxes to pay for the increased costs to the citizens. And I think a lot of times citizens don't realize how much of a benefit that businesses are to the citizens, because the second highest income stream for Liberty Hill right now is sales tax from businesses within the city limits. And that's really true of cities all over America. The highest right now is actually permitting, but that's not a long-term sustainable revenue, but it also happens to be deeply connected with business development. So tell me your thoughts about what the implication of having that sign out there on Highway 29 attracting this business to the businesses in Liberty Hill is to benefit the citizens.
Sure. So, you know, you reiterated a lot of that, but and I think a lot of people don't realize that the city limits of Liberty Hill is actually very small and focuses on that 29 corridor right here. And so then the burden of generating sales tax is really in that small kind of corridor and area in order to support the city. And that can only be done if businesses are successful by bringing people in. So having a sign to be able to advertise your business that's lit in an appropriate fashion when it's dark outside is important to doing that. And then, you know, one thing we haven't touched on, which is in addition to the sign, is the lights.
Right.
And so for most small businesses, just being able to illuminate your business in the evening, but also overnight from a safety perspective.
Yes.
You know, I think there was some discussion at the last Planning and Zoning Committee about that, and there's a gentleman on the committee that was with the police department and was speaking about that a little bit, just about it deterring crime.
Yes.
That's why we leave our porch lights on. And so that is important, and to me as a small business owner, and to many people, to be able to provide that lighting around your business as well.
Yeah, I think you're making a really great point here that people need to think about and consider. I think you're explaining it that by having the lights on, which, the ordinance does allow it to be on for 1 hour after you close, but most people don't have a timer to just have that turn off an hour after you close. What they have is, okay, we have to adhere to this ordinance, so we have to shut off the lights and walk through the dark to our cars.
Right.
And in businesses, that could be a time that jeopardizes the employee's safety. On top of that, though, throughout the night, having a well-lit area around your building does deter crime.
Sure.
And by deterring crime, it also, if we think in a broader picture, I would think that if you can't well light your business and crime increases, that it's going to end up costing more to insure businesses in Liberty Hill, and that cost is going to be passed right down to the citizens.
Sure.
Would that be accurate?
Sure. I think it is accurate, and just I'm just thinking about just from pure safety of employees, safety of customers coming in and out, but also against break-ins, and just having things well lit at night. That's just an important thing for us as a small business owner, and again, I think for a lot of small businesses as well. I'm going to go back to the point that you made, Bill, about sales tax and being able to support that, and being a source of revenue for the city, to ultimately be able to defray property taxes for homeowners, and in addition to property taxes that businesses pay, which are pretty substantial.
Yes.
So for businesses to be successful, to be able to drive their sales or drive their revenue, that supports the sales tax, but also provides them the opportunity to be able to pay the property taxes to sustain their locations and the buildings that they've invested in this community.
Yes. And I guess one of the things that they're talking about is, well, you can have the sign on during the day, although we do understand the ordinances as they're written right now are trying to eliminate those signs in the future after 2027. But the other question that seems to be asked is whether or not having those signs, those electronic message display signs, on during the night while people are driving through, coming back from the lake shift, whether that potentially adds any monetary value to the citizens. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting comment at the meeting, and I would say it does. I mean, I had a different profession prior to doing this, and I worked night shift, and so that was when I was out and I was about. So I think that the ability to utilize a sign that we've paid $30,000 for should be allowed to be done at night when we know that there's traffic on Highway 29. It's a very well-traveled corridor in this community, and I think that that's an important avenue for businesses to be able to advertise.
Yes, and one of the other things that I think is interesting kind of about the discussions that are going on, because the City of Liberty Hill sent out letters to all of the business owners down 29 that have electronic message displays and told them, you might lose legal use of your property, because of what's being proposed in the City Council. Now, me personally, and we won't talk about this today, but I think that they should also send that letter to every resident in the city and every resident in the ETJ, because the lighting ordinances will actually affect them in a similar way by 2027.
Sure.
But one of the things I thought was interesting, and I totally understand it, you have business owners like yourself that have spent a lot of money to put that sign up, and a lot of these business owners are just asking, hey, please grandfather us. But one of the questions that I would like to throw out there for discussion is, should our emphasis be on just grandfathering businesses that already invested the money, or if electronic message displays are actually good for bringing revenues to the city and protecting citizens from property taxes, should we really be questioning whether or not we should be banning them at all?
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
Sure, Bill. And I think, well, maybe even stepping back, it doesn't seem like the city has been thoughtful about what do we want to be when we grow up, right? Like, what do we want this city to look like? What do we want it to feel like when we grow up? When we came into this community, and we did so with, a lot of research, and, where do we want to invest? This isn't, a small investment for an individual like myself. And this became a community that we wanted to invest with because there was growth. At the time when we built our building and the sign ordinance was in place, the city was actually pretty easy to work with. It wasn't a difficult process, but this was many years ago, and a lot of things have changed. There's been a lot of red tape put in place that is impeding businesses from being able to open in a timely fashion. So it seems like the train has left the station, if you will,
yes.
And now they're trying to get the train to come back. When there's already a lot of signage, a lot of reader boards, they're already there, they're already out there, and they do say they're going to grandfather or might grandfather them in. But then my understanding of the regulation is that if that sign breaks and it costs more than half the price of the sign to fix it, that then you're going to be required to take that sign down. But then in addition to that, by 2027, you're not going to be able to use it anyway.
Right.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
And while I do think that it would seem right to grandfather businesses that already have them put up, I think from the perspective of increasing the economic benefit of businesses to the citizens, helping businesses to attract revenues directly helps the citizens. So I think we really should have the broader discussion of whether or not these are valuable to the citizens themselves.
Sure.
And that being said, I think you mentioned that had you known where Liberty Hill was going to be going, you might have reconsidered actually developing here. Would you say that's accurate?
It's extremely accurate. I think for any small business, it's a big investment. We invested millions of dollars in Liberty Hill. It's not a small investment to build a building of this size and to buy a piece of property and to go through that process, to hire employees, to do all the daily things that you need to do in order to make it successful. And so that was done with a lot of research and a lot of due diligence. And I believe today, if I were looking at this city, I may have made a different decision.
Right. And I think as I've been talking to different business owners, they all have kind of different networks of business owners that are outside of Liberty Hill.
Sure.
And one thing that has been a common theme as I'm talking to them is that in their circles, Liberty Hill is getting a reputation of not being a positive place to develop business. Is that something you've been experiencing as well?
Sure. Most definitely. That people that I communicate with outside of Liberty Hill and in other areas and other communities are starting to see the rumblings of that. And again, maybe that's what the citizens of Liberty Hill want, but I think what you're trying to do, Bill, is inform people so that they can make a decision about what they want their city to look like,
right.
And what they want their property taxes to be,
yes.
And whether they can support that and if that's viable for them or not.
Right. Like, I completely agree with the idea of aesthetics and really trying to build a beautiful city, and I think that ordinances can do that, but I think that getting feedback from the community and getting other voices involved in the conversation so that they understand what the trade-offs are also really important so that we can design a city that really helps and benefits the citizens. And that's why we're doing these kind of videos with different business owners and different people that are related to the city in different ways to give them a voice and open up a broader conversation. But I agree, if the citizens of Liberty Hill were theoretically to say, hey, we want to resist growth as much as possible, so go ahead and raise our property taxes to the maximum amount allowable by law. Well, that's part of the democratic process.
Sure.
But it needs to be done with a full understanding of what those implications are and what it will mean to each of them personally, what they're actually buying into when they do this. And so I'm really grateful that you've taken time to come and do this video with us and help inform the citizens of Liberty Hill to think more deeply about some of the things that are happening with the city.
Sure.
I mean, one of my ideas, and as part of the Liberty Hill Voters Association, what I'd like to have is a kind of association where people can think very differently and have completely different opinions and stand on different sides on different issues, but still recognize we're citizens, we're all in this together, we're human beings first, we respect one another, but be able to talk about these things in a civil manner, for the benefits of people. But the thing that keeps going back in my mind is that it's more than just the city deciding what it wants to be. We have all this growth around the city that we have to respond to. It's not an option anymore because there's going to be increased costs to the city just by nature of the growth that's happening all around us.
Sure.
And we either manage that growth in a way that builds aesthetics and really builds the economy locally so that there's revenues to the city, or we just say, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to raise property taxes. What would your thoughts be about those kind of ideas?
It's the democratic process, right?
Yes.
But I think part of that is people taking the responsibility to become informed about what's happening in their communities, and showing up to vote.
Yes.
And showing up to participate in that process is important. But yes, I think you're correct. The growth that's happening on all sides of Liberty Hill is happening whether or not Liberty Hill chooses to participate in that growth or not. This ability to remain a small town, a small undeveloped town is no more. But I think you can still have a small town community feel when it's intentionally developed that way. But the citizens of Liberty Hill are going to need to participate in that process and understand what they're trying to develop, what they're trying to do, for sure.
Well, good. Well, you actually brought up another issue in my mind that I think is very fun to address and think about and talk about, and that really has to do with the overall idea of a dark skies to Liberty Hill.
Sure.
And I know that what they're saying is that they believe that by being dark skies, we're going to attract tourists to the city of Liberty Hill. And so I might not be as much of an expert, obviously, as like a business person like yourself, but it would seem to me that if you wanted to attract business to Liberty Hill, good lighting is something that would be more conducive in my mind. I'm thinking of like downtown Liberty Hill. If you were to build beautiful lighting, well lit through the evening, then restaurants that would open down there, people would be more likely to go down there and spend money than if the businesses that are open later are able to have their lights on, but all the others have to turn their lights off, or the lights are not good enough to make you feel safe when you go down and visit a city. What are your thoughts about something like that?
I'm not an expert on this, but just it doesn't reconcile in my brain that you want to become a dark sky community in order to attract tourism, and then when individuals get here, there's no restaurants for them to eat at, there's no hotel for them to stay at. It doesn't quite mesh in my head. But again, it's not my area of expertise. But fundamentally, to have tourism and have people come to your community means you have to have resources in order for them available for them. So I'm not quite sure I can put those two together.
Right. Yes. And I also think when I talk about hidden costs that we don't often evaluate in the conversation. So like when I'm looking at the ordinance as it's written, I mean, it's really comprehensive. It defines how many lumens can come from different lights. It determines what kind of color they have to be. It talks even about residential neighborhoods, and if your neighbor can see your light bulb, you're out of compliance, and you're only allowed so much lighting around your house, and everybody has to conform by 2027. All your lights have to be shielded. All the public lights also have to be shielded, and there's costs to coming into compliance in many areas. But another aspect is also code enforcement. You have to pay somebody for code enforcement, and that seems to be something that isn't really considered. And that code enforcement includes every single house right now in the city and in the ETJ, as well as every business that has to be held into compliance. And in my mind, I just can't imagine the astronomical cost of that. What I kind of imagine, and this is, maybe me and my skepticism, but I imagine what will end up happening is one neighbor who knows the ordinances, who doesn't like their neighbor's lights, will report them, and they will be fined, but the vast majority who are also not in compliance will probably not get fined at all. So it's hard for me to imagine that there would be equal enforcement of these ordinances in a way that is fair and just. And even the idea that people in the ETJ are going to be held accountable to these laws when they don't even get a vote in the city, it kind of sounds to me a little bit about like, hey, taxation without representation. So I think that there's even kind of fundamental principles that we have to evaluate as our city. I think that Liberty Hill is a city that really values liberty. I think that it has a lot of people that moved to Liberty Hill because they wanted to get away from some of these other things that they see happening in our nation that they're not really pleased with. And I think the idea of dark skies connects with them in a way. It's kind of like, hey, we want to stop growth because we don't want to become that. We like the idea of being able to see the stars when we have our children and grandchildren come over, but they don't think about how we're creating layers of bureaucracy and layers of red tape, that if we want to make a change to our house, we have to submit a plan, show all the lighting that's there, the new lights, their location, their brand, the brand of the light bulb, the lumens, the color, submit it, go through the process, get approval. Think about what that's putting through the system when you also are trying to develop businesses and develop other things. It seems to be a high cost in people's time. And we know when somebody's opening a business, if you extend the time it takes to open that business, you're likely starting them in the red and handicapping them. So what would be your thoughts about some of these things?
Well, again, I think it's people informing themselves that this not only affects businesses, but also affects homeowners in the community, and just the over-regulation and the red tape and the bureaucracy, as you mentioned. And is that the kind of is that the kind of community that you want to build, where you're feeling over-regulated, over-policed, enforced? I'm not sure that is. And I think you hit on that, Bill, that the concept of the dark skies is sounds good. It sounds like I'm going to come and I'm going to, have some liberty and have some freedom, when in fact there's a lot of bureaucracy that's going to come into play because of that. It's not the, small government, leave me alone feel and mentality. It's actually going to start turning into the opposite here, which I think is what you're trying to shine some light on.
Yeah, I think, Liberty Hill, and this could just be me and kind of my love for just the name of the city itself. I mean, it's an amazing name for a city, Liberty Hill. And when I think about liberty, you do have to ask questions about property rights, and I'm not against, the government saying, hey, we're restricting what you are legally allowed to do on your property. Let's say it's building codes for people's safety. That has value, that's benefiting everybody. But I think really wrestling with how do we handle this kind of sticking my nose in your business, I have to be able to justify that really is in the best interest of everybody. What do you think about that?
Yes, I believe in property rights, and understanding that there's regulations in place to protect safety, to protect access for handicapped individuals, for example, and completely agree and understand compliance with those. But when just regulation over regulation over regulation comes into play, that makes it more difficult for a business to either open or, once opened, to flourish. I believe handicaps the city to be able to continue to develop. But again, I think the city has to step back and determine, what is it that we want to be when we grow up, and is this intentional? Is this what we're trying to do? Are we trying to restrict growth? Are we trying to restrict businesses from coming in when everyone around Liberty Hill is growing? It's an important discussion, and it's an important question to ask. But it's something that I think any business owner is going to look at when they choose to invest their, personal money, their livelihood on a community. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I want to thank you for taking this time to come and answer questions and do this interview. I really believe it's going to be helpful to the citizens of Liberty Hill to hear other voices, get other opinions on things that our city is doing, and hopefully we can have good conversations, think about these things in a civil way, and really help Liberty Hill to move in a direction that really benefits the citizens, flourishes economically. My personal hope and desire would also be to restrict increasing property taxes, and maybe by some miracle actually decreasing property taxes someday in the future.
Sure.
But again, I want to thank all of you who have watched this video to the end. I would encourage you to get involved with the Liberty Hill Voters Association. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/LH Voters. Thank you. Have a good day.